Sri Gurubhyo Namaha, and welcome to the Sri Vidya Temple's class on Mantra Pushpam, which we started last Saturday. So we'll be finishing that up tonight. So we'll start with the Ganapati prayer and then start. Om Shuklam Baradharam Vishnum Shashivarnam Chaturbhujam Prasannavadanam Dhyayet Sarva Viknopashantaye. Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. So I think what I'll do just to start is I will chant from the beginning by myself as a review, so everyone can practice what we learned last time. And we'll be ending with the section on Nakshatraniva. That's the last part that we got through. And so once we do the review, then we'll go on. Om Yopam Pushpam Veda Pushpavan Prajavan Pashuman Bhavati Chandramava Apam Pushpam Pushpavan Prajavan Pashuman Bhavati Ya evam Veda Yopamayatano Veda Ayatanavan Bhavati Agnirva Apamayatanam Ayatanavan Bhavati Yo Agnirayatano Veda Ayatanavan Bhavati Apovam Agnirayatanam Ayatanavan Bhavati Ya evam Veda Yopamayatano Veda Ayatanavan Bhavati Vayurva Apamayatanam Ayatanavan Bhavati Yo Vayorayatano Veda Ayatanavan Bhavati Apo Vai Vayorayatanam Ayatanavan Bhavati Ya evam Veda Yopamayatano Veda Ayatanavan Bhavati Aso Vaitapannapamayatanam Ayatanavan Bhavati Yomashyatapata Ayatano Veda Ayatanavan Bhavati Apova Amushyatapata Ayatanam Ayatanavan Bhavati Ya evam Veda Yopamayatano Veda Ayatanavan Bhavati Chandramava Apamayatanam Ayatanavan Bhavati Yaschandramasa Ayatano Veda Ayatanavan Bhavati Apo Vai Chandramasa Ayatanam Ayatanavan Bhavati Ya evam Veda Yopamayatano Veda Ayatanavan Bhavati Nakshatrani Va Apamayatanam Ayatanavan Bhavati Yo Nakshatranamayatanam Veda Ayatanavan Bhavati Apo Vai Nakshatranamayatanam Ayatanavan bhavati ya evam veda yopamayatana veda ayatanavan bhavati. Okay, so before we start, did anyone have any particular lines that they found more difficult or that they want any review or practice on?
I have a question.
Yes.
So the part that goes Yopa Mayatanam Veda, like the M with the dot above, how is it supposed to sound?
So that's a really good question. As you know, that M with a dot is anuswara, which changes its pronunciation based on what comes after it. So in this case, what comes after is a va sound. So for anyone who's new, it's fine to say that as a regular sound, like ayatanam veda. People who train very carefully will pronounce it more like a nasalization of a v sound. So it's kind of like if you get the chance to watch any like priests trained in patashalas and so on, you can sort of watch them as they chant, and you'll get a sense for how they're chanting it. Om Veda. It's kind of like you're closing the mouth and creating a nasal sound, but you don't, it's like you're nasalizing the va. So Om Veda. It takes a little bit of practice and listening and sort of watching people's mouths as well to see how it's pronounced, but it's one of those things that just takes a little time. But you can think of it as nasalizing a v sound. So it's not like a full closing of Veda. It's more like Om Veda. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, it did. I
Okay.
was listening to you say it and I was trying to copy it. It's like, oh, I don't know if I'm
I
doing
know.
it right.
It's one of the trickier sounds, and it does take time for sure, along with the one when there's a ya sound after it, like shan yo in Durga Suktam. So that's also another one that's very tricky. It's like a ain sound, shan yo, even though it's an M with a dot. And so it looks like it should be sham yo. It's more like a nasalization of the ya that follows. Shan yo.
I think in Rudra Masa it comes, right? Triambagai, that's what he says.
Exactly. Triambakaya Jamahe. So if you
That's what I
listen,
got.
try listening to Chalakede Brothers, and I forgot to post the link to Mantra Pushpam by them, but I will do that for sure this weekend. Just try like listening very carefully and train your ear to listen and hear exactly what they're saying. It's very good practice to do that, to be able to listen and hear the sounds as they are and not just what we expect them to be. That's very good practice for the ear in general. So see if you can hear the difference in what they're pronouncing. So I'll post that soon, probably tomorrow. So any other questions on any other lines or anything? Okay, all right. So moving on. Sriji, do you want to unmute yourself and repeat the lines?
Sure.
So starting from Parjanyo. Parjanyo va
Parjanyoba, Parjanyoba,
apamayatanam
Apamayatanam, Apamayatanam,
Parjanyo va apamayatanam
Parjanyoba, Apamayatanam, Parjanyoba, Apamayatanam.
So I'll chant it 4 times and then Sriji can repeat it 4 times as practice. पर्जन्यो वा अपमायतनं पर्जन्यो वा अपमायतनं पर्जन्यो वा अपमायतनं पर्जन्यो वा अपमायतनं
पर्जन्यो वा अपामायतनम् पर्जन्यो वा अपामायतनम् पर्जन्यो वा अपामायतनम् पर्जन्यो वा अपामायतनम्.
So we'll skip over the next line, which we've already reviewed, and going to the next one. Yaf parjanyasya
यः पर्जन्यस्य यः पर्जन्यस्य
yatanam. Sorry, I skipped a line. Yatano veda
यतनौ वेद यतनौ वेद
yaf parjanyasya yatano veda
यः पर्जन्यस्यायतनौ वेद यः पर्जन्यस्यायतनौ वेद.
Now I'll repeat it 4 times. Yaf parjanyasya yatano veda yaf parjanyasya yatano veda yaf parjanyasya yatano veda yaf parjanyasya yatano veda. And CJ, you can
यः
repeat.
पर्जन्यस्यायतनौ वेद यः पर्जन्यस्यायतनौ वेद यः पर्जन्यस्यायतनौ वेद यः पर्जन्यस्यायतनौ वेद.
Okay, now the next one. Apo vai
आपो वै आपो वै
parjanyasya
पर्जन्यस्य पर्जन्यस्य
yatanam
यतनं यतनं
parjanyasya yatanam
पर्जन्यस्यायतनं पर्जन्यस्यायतनं.
Apo vai parjanyasya yatanam
आपो वै पर्जन्यस्यायतनम् आपो वै पर्जन्यस्यायतनम्.
Now I'll repeat it 4 times. Apo vai parjanyasya yatanam Apo vai parjanyasya yatanam Apo vai parjanyasya yatanam Apo vai parjanyasya yatanam.
आपो वै पर्जन्यस्यायतनम् आपो वै पर्जन्यस्यायतनम् आपो वै पर्जन्यस्यायतनम् आपो वै पर्जन्यस्यायतनम्.
Okay, so everything, the final line we've already done. So I'll chant the whole section through as a review. Parjanyo va apamayatanam ayatanavan bhavati yaf parjanyasyayatanam veda ayatanavan bhavati apo vai parjanyasyayatanam ayatanavan bhavati ya evam veda yopamayatanam veda ayatanavan bhavati. Okay, would anyone else like to repeat the lines? Adit, go ahead, please. Samvatsaro va
Samvatsaro va, Samvatsaro va,
apamayatanam
apamayatanam, apamayatanam.
Samvatsaro va apamayatanam
Samvatsaro va, apamayatanam. Samvatsaro va, apamayatanam.
Good. Now I'll chant it 4 times. Samvatsaro va apamayatanam Samvatsaro va apamayatanam Samvatsaro va apamayatanam Samvatsaro va apamayatanam. Do you want to repeat it 4 times?
Sure. Samvatsaro va apamayatanam. Samvatsaro va apamayatanam. Samvatsaro va apamayatanam. Samvatsaro va apamayatanam.
Good. Now we'll go to the yes samvatsa. Yes samvat
Yes, Samvat, yes, Samvat,
sarasya
Sarasya, Sarasya,
yes samvat sarasya
yes, Samvat, Sarasya, yes, Samvat, Sarasya,
yatanam veda
Yatanau Veda, Yatanau Veda,
yes samvat sarasya yatanam veda
yes, Samvat, Sarasya, Yatanau Veda, yes, Samvat, Sarasya, Yatanau Veda.
Good. Now I'll do it 4 times. Yes samvatsarasya yatanam veda yes samvatsarasya yatanam veda yes samvatsarasya yatanam veda Yas samvatsarasyayatanam Veda. You want to go ahead 4 times?
Yes. Yep. Yes, Samvatsarasyayatanau Veda. Yes, Samvatsarasyayatanau Veda. Yes, Samvatsarasyayatanau Veda. Yes, Samvatsarasyayatanau Veda.
Good. Now the next one. Apo vai
Apo vai, apo vai,
samvatsarasya
samvatsarasya, samvatsarasya,
Apo vai samvatsarasya
apo vai samvatsarasya, apo vai samvatsarasya,
Apo vai samvatsarasyayatanam
apo vai samvatsarasyayatanam, apo vai samvatsarasyayatanam.
Good. Now I'll do it 4 times. Apo vai samvatsarasyayatanam Apo vai samvatsarasyayatanam Apo vai samvatsarasyayatanam Apo vai samvatsarasyayatanam
Apo vai samvatsarasyayatanam. Apo vai samvatsarasyayatanam. Apo vai samvatsarasyayatanam. Apo vai samvatsarasyayatanam.
Good. Now you get a bonus because in this section, the last line actually changes because it's the last kind of section in this pattern, this particular pattern. So it changes slightly. So the Yaevam Veda is the same, but then the next one is different. Yo Sunavam
Yo Sunavam. Yo Sunavam.
Very close. Yo Sunavam
Yo Sunavam. Yo Sunavam.
That's it. Pratishtitam Veda
Pratishthitam Veda. Pratishthitam Veda.
Yo Sunavam Pratishtitam Veda
Yo Sunavam Pratishthitam Veda. Yo Sunavam Pratishthitam Veda.
Good. So now I'll chant it 4 times. Yo Sunavam Pratishtitam Veda Yo Sunavam Pratishtitam Veda Yo Sunavam Pratishtitam Veda Yo Sunavam Pratishtitam pratishthitam Veda.
Yo upsunavam pratishtitam Veda. Yo upsunavam pratishtitam Veda. Yo upsunavam pratishtitam Veda. Yo upsunavam pratishtitam Veda.
Good. Pratyeva tishtati.
Pratyeva tishtati. Pratyeva tishtati.
Good. I'll chant it 4 times. Pratyeva tishtati. Pratyeva tishtati. Pratyeva tishtati. Pratyeva tishtati.
Pratyeva tishtati. Pratyeva tishtati. Pratyeva tishtati. Pratyeva tishtati.
Good. And so everyone just notice the Mahapranas in Pratishthi, Shthi. That's a tricky one because of the retroflex shta sound, but that's a Mahaprana. Pratishthi-tam. And then also Tishtati, Tishtati. Also in the Devanagari, it's very tricky between shta and shta. It's a very small difference. So just pointing that out. Okay, so now I'll chant it, that section 1 time through as review. Samvatsaro va apamayatanam ayatanavan bhavati yas samvatsarasyayatanam veda ayatanavan bhavati apo vai samvatsarasyayatanam ayatanavan bhavati ya evam veda yo apsunavam pratishtitam veda pratyeva tishtati. Okay, so now comes the last part, which is traditional to chant at the end of Mantra Pushpam. And a lot of people will probably recognize this as something that we chant by itself during Karpura Arati very frequently. So the thing here is that it's actually more tricky to learn something that you're kind of are mostly familiar with, especially because in the temple, whenever this is being chanted, the Nadaswaram CD is also being played, or the real live Nadaswaram players. And so with all of that going on, it's almost impossible to hear the swaras or even to hear yourself chanting, really. So it can be very confusing as to what the swaras actually are. So this section, it's actually almost more tricky because you may have thought that you heard what it is, but maybe you didn't actually hear because of all the other sounds, bells and everything, going in the temple. So would anybody like to repeat these lines? Koshi Amma, please do. Don't worry, we're all learning together. Rajadhirajaya
Rajadhirajaya, Rajadhirajaya.
Good. Prasahya sahine.
Prasahya sahine, Prasahya sahine.
Good. Rajadhirajaya prasahya sahine.
Rajadhirajaya prasahya sahine Rajadhirajaya prasahya sahine.
I have a quick question. Is
Yeah.
it Sahine or Sahine?
Yeah,
That's what I was gonna ask you.
mention that we have found another typo of mine. So that should be Sahine, like you said. So you can just make a note and hopefully I'll correct this at some point. So exactly, that should be Sahine. Very good.
Awesome. Thank you.
Okay. So, and also notice the holding on yup. Raja yup prasahya. Prasahya. Raja yup prasahya. Okay, so I'll chant this 4 times. Okay. Rajadhiraja yup prasahya sahine. Rajadhirajaya prasahya sahine. Rajadhirajaya prasahya sahine. Rajadhirajaya prasahya sahine. Kaushi, do you want to repeat 4 times?
Sure. Rajadhirajaya prasahya sahine Rajadhirajaya prasahya sahine Rajadhirajaya prasahya sahine Rajadhirajaya prasahya sahine.
Very good. Namo Vayam.
Namo Vayam. Namo Vayam.
Vaishravarnaya.
Vaishravarnaya. Vaishravarnaya.
Good. Just notice the holding on ish. Even though it's a dirgha, there's holding on the shra because shra is a conjunct akshara. Vaishravarnaya.
Vaishravarnaya. Vaishravarnaya.
Good. Kurmahe.
Kurmahe. Kurmahe.
Vaishravarnaya kurmahe.
Vaishravarnaya kurmahe. Vaishravarnaya kurmahe.
Good. Namo Vayam Vaishravarnaya kurmahe.
Namo Vayam Vaishravarnaya kurmahe. Namo Vayam Namo Vayam Namo Vayam Vaishravarnaya kurmahe.
Good. So anytime you find yourself having trouble with a line, just feel free to slow it down. You don't have to chant it as quickly as I've chanted it. If you need to slow it down a little bit so that it's easier to focus on each syllable and where the swara should be, please do that. No problem. Now I'll chant it 4 times. Namo Vayam Vaishravarnaya kurmahe. Namo Vayam Vaishravarnaya kurmahe. Namo Vayam Vaishravarnaya kurmahe. Namo Vayam Vaishravarnaya Ishravarnaya Kurmahe. Do you want to try it 4 times?
Yeah, I'll try. Namo vayam vai Ishravarnaya kurmahe. Namo vayam vai Ishravarnaya kurmahe. Namo vayam vai Ishravarnaya kurmahe. Namo vayam vai Ishravarnaya kurmahe.
Very good, Kaushi. Okay, next line. Same kaman.
Same kaman. Same kaman.
Kama kamaya.
Kama kamaya. Kama kamaya. Oh. Kama kamaya.
Good. Mahyam.
Mahyam. Mahyam.
Kama kamaya mahyam.
Kama kamaya mahyam. Kama kamaya mahyam.
Same kaman kama kamaya mahyam.
Same kaman kama kamaya mahyam. Same kaman kama kamaya mahyam.
Good. Now I'll chant it 4 times. Same kaman kama kamaya mahyam. 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 Try it 4 times.
Same kaman kama kamaya mahyam. Same kaman kama kamaya mahyam. Same kaman kama kamaya mahyam. Same kaman kama kamaya mahyam.
Good. Now the next line. Kameshwaro.
Kameshwaro. Kameshwaro.
Vai Ishravarno.
Vaishravarno. Vaishravarno.
Dadatu.
Dadatu. Dadatu.
Vai Ishravarno dadatu.
Vaishravarno dadatu. Vaishravarno dadatu.
Kameshwaro vai Ishravarno dadatu.
Kameshwaro Vaishravano dadatu. Kameshwaro Vaishravano dadatu.
Good. Now I'll chant it 4 times. Kameshwaro vai Ishravarno dadatu. Kameshwaro vai Ishravarno dadatu. Vaishravarno dadatu. Kameshwaro Vaishravarno dadatu.
Kameshvaro Vaishravano dadatu. Kameshvaro Vaishravano dadatu. Kameshvaro Vaishravano dadatu. Kameshvaro Vaishravano dadatu.
Very good. And everyone just remember the holding on Kameshwaro, Eshwaro, and also Vaishravarna, Vaishravarno. All right, now the next line. Kuberaya,
Kuberaya, Kuberaya,
Vaishravarnaya,
Vaishravarnaya, Vaishravarnaya,
Kuberaya, Vaishravarnaya,
Kuberaya, Vaishravarnaya, Kuberaya, Vaishravarnaya.
Good. Now I'll do it 4 times. Kuberaya Vaishravarnaya, Kuberaya Vaishravarnaya, Kuberaya Vaishravarnaya, Kuberaya Vaishravarnaya.
Kuberaya Vaishravarnaya, Kuberaya Vaishravarnaya, Kuberaya Vaishravarnaya, Kuberaya Vaishravarnaya.
Good. Maharajaya,
Maharajaya, Maharajaya,
Namaha,
Namaha, Namaha.
Maharajaya Namaha,
Maharajaya Namaha, Maharajaya Namaha.
Good. Now 4 times. Maharajaya Namaha, Maharajaya Namaha, Maharajaya Namaha, Maharajaya Namaha.
Maharajaya Namaha, Maharajaya Namaha, Maharajaya Namaha, Maharajaya Namaha.
Very good. So now I'll chant the whole section 1 time through as review. Rajadhirajaya prasahya sahine Namo vayam vai ishravarnaya kurmahe Same kaman kama kama yamahyam Kameshwaro vai ishravarno dadatu Kuberaya Vaishravarnaya Maharajaya Namaha. All right, so we have just a few minutes left. So I think I'll go back to the beginning of where we started tonight and just chant that 1 time through as one final review, starting from Parjanyo. पर्जन्यो वा अपामायतनम् आयतनवान् भवति यः पर्जन्यस्यायतनो वेद आयतनवान् भवति आपो वै पर्जन्यस्यायतनम् आयतनवान् भवति य एवं वेद योपमायतनो वेद आयतनवान् भवति संवत्सरो वा अपामायतनम् आयतनवान् भवति यः संवत्सरस्यायतनो वेद आयतनवान् भवति आपो वै संवत्सरस्यायतनम् आयतनवान् भवति य एवं वेद यो अप्सुनावं प्रतिष्ठितां वेद प्रत्येव तिष्ठति राजाधिराजाय प्रसह्य साहिने नमो वयं वै श्रवणाय कुर्महे समे कामान् कामकामाय मह्यम् कामेश्वरो वै श्रवणो ददातु कुबेराय वै श्रवणाय महाराजाय नमः. Okay, so any questions on anything that we learned tonight or any other lines? Any questions about this?
Ektam, I want to know the spelling for the Pratishtitam or Pratishtitam. Last but one actually above Rajadhirajaya, the last line. In Tamil it says Pratishtitam. Is that correct?
Yes.
Pratishtitam.
Yes.
Okay.
I may not be sort of enunciating that final dirgha fully because
Okay.
it's hard to pronounce the next sounds. So that's a good thing to focus on. That's also good for me to focus on.
Okay, Pratishtitam.
Because it's like you're opening the mouth for the ah sound and then you have to close it as well. So it's a little bit tricky. So that's something that I also need to practice a little bit, but that is supposed to be dirgha.
Thank you.
At the end.
Okay.
All right, any other questions? Okay. All right then, so everyone did very well who repeated the lines. And as I said, I will post the recording of Chalakere brothers chanting this mantra Pushpam. I'll post that and mention it in the learning group as well. All right, so thanks very much to everyone who joined. Thank you so much. And then next time we'll continue with Devi Mahatmyam chapter 7.
Thank you.
Okay, good night everyone.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Good night. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you, Akta, for teaching us the mantra Pushpam.
Most welcome. Thank you for joining.
Ilango, what time is it where you are?
It's 2 a.m.
Oh my God.
He really likes mantra Pushpam too.
Incredible. You're staying up until 2.